dim and dim as the lamps get older. And they're only bright enough when you relamp them. We replace them with these LEDs, which uses 1/4 the energy as well. So win-win there. Also, the building C was re-roofed completely. That's the gyms, locker rooms, commons, PAC building at Tumwater High School. And asset preservation there. It's time to re-roof. And then you see down there, there's a reader, but Dan Reich calls them reader boards. I call them emergency alert systems, but we're putting those in the school. So it's basically alerts people who may be hard of hearing, and B, if there's allowed space like the lunchroom or the gyms, you can flash an alert. And also we put them where the buses are. So if bus drivers pull up and there's a lockdown, they can see that and not release the kids. In the meantime, it shows high school students what time it is and how much time they had to get to their next class. And also in the foreground, there is some fencing that was security fencing that was actually done with bond money. But we're Tumwater High School and Black Hills High School also got new intercom systems, which the old systems were a standalone system and they were maintained by Buildings and Grounds. The new intercom system hangs off the data network, so now that migrates them over to technology for maintenance. And so what it means too is that it used to come out of maintenance funds to add a speaker, replace a speaker, replace a clock. Now it comes out of technology funds. And then this is what we're working on for the next year. So continuing to plan and design the number 7 elementary, some work, roof work at Black Hills, exterior paint Black Hills. I'm meeting the mechanical engineer tomorrow morning to look at the boilers and chiller. They're in danger of failing. So, well, not immediate, but close. So if the boiler goes down again, we don't have school until we can get a rental in. Michael T. Simmons replaced classroom furniture. We're replacing HVAC controls at support services and also adding the controls to walk-in freezer and cooler so we can monitor their temperature and it'll send an alert if they're getting too warm. And then technology replaced staff computers district-wide and continuing with the emergency alert system and other projects as they arise. So challenges and opportunities.
No, what is just operations? Is that just garden variety?
That is the only salaries that can be paid out of capital funds are capital projects. So that is myself, Anita, and Tanya Baker. Anita's our office assistant. Tanya's our projects manager. We also can pay part of the salaries for maintenance and technology as they directly relate to installing things like computers and intercom systems. Maintenance also assists us with making keys, getting cards, getting codes for our contractors to get into buildings. Sometimes they go out and help the contractor figure out what they're trying to, if they're trying to hook it into an existing plumbing or hydronic heating system, help them show where the lines are running. We replaced the sewer line at Tumwater High School, and that was a big job for Ralph, our plumber, to show the plumber who's going to do the installation exactly where the connections are. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So this is part of the assessment findings, just to show you what we have in buildings across the district. So this 54 permanent buildings, 1.1 million square feet, worth $400 million. This is what we take care of on a daily basis, 24/7. And you can see the different ages and the cost to replace each. And so there's always work to be done on a building, whether it's a hot water heater or a roof or a new classroom wing. And they rated each building, and the facility conditions, these are the reflections. These are attaboys for our maintenance team. Proactive maintenance, fewer than they found fewer observed deficiencies than they would have expected in a district our size and our age of buildings. That they did find 219, but they were, they 500 to 700 would have been typical. Yeah. I think that our capital projects department and our buildings and grounds department work together well to make sure we don't worry about who's paying for it until the bill comes and then we argue about it. So the larger the project, the more likely it's going to turn into a capital project though. So, but maintenance takes care of a lot. And we also like to, emphasis on health, safety and security. A lot of people always, they emphasize safety and security. We have always emphasized health. And that relates into our HVAC systems. We probably have some expensive HVAC systems, but we're very glad we have them right now.
Yeah.
And they will also last longer. That was one thing they found is that the equipment didn't need to be replaced, could be refurbished. You might need some new belts, new motors here and there, new fan blades, but you didn't need to take the whole machine out and get a new machine. And so these are the average scores by facility. And you can see that, Cascadia High and the Tumwater Learning Center, that's brand new building, 99. Down to Tumwater High School is a 77. So this is 54 buildings, the average. So we're very, very good shape here. I point out that Peter G. Schmidt and Little Rock, in 86 and 84, these are brand new buildings, but Peter G. Schmidt also has the gym from 2005 and the old library building from 1975 that affects the average score. Same with Little Rock, their gym is from 1975 and they have a 6 classroom pod building that is from 1985. So that will drag those averages down. But on average, we're in very good shape. So short-term facility asset management strategy priorities. So short-term being Levy, and you're going to see again asset preservation, keeping kids and staff warm and dry, the essential infrastructure, stressing health, safety, and security, and then also we're energy efficiency is going to come into play here with the Clean Building Act. Any building over 50,000 square feet is going to have to meet a energy use per square foot goal. And if you do not meet that goal, you will be fined by the state. And that's any commercial building, and schools are under this act are considered commercial buildings. We have several that are over 50,000 square feet. They're phased in from 200,000 square feet to 50,000 square feet from 2025 through 2027. We have a couple, Tumwater High School is over what it's supposed to be, so we're focusing on that building first. And there actually is grant money from Department of Commerce to help you meet that Clean Building Act compliance earlier than you're required to. So we want to leverage those funds, and we'll also try to leverage them when we replace the boilers and chiller at Black Hills High School. They'll be with a more efficient unit, use less energy, and hopefully get some money from Department of Commerce to pay for it. We will certainly get some grant money from Puget Sound Energy to pay part of it, but not very much. And finally, the more energy efficient you are, the less utility bills you pay. And what I try to stress is that we don't see utility bills go down. What we want to see, what we'll probably see is on the state level, because rates are always increasing. So we're trying to decrease our energy use by the amount that the rate is increasing. Finally, under site, this is, people kind of tend to forget the paving, the landscaping, the sidewalks, and then, the interior finishes. It's kind of like the aesthetics of the building. You want it to look good when you drive up. You also don't want to trip and break your ankle. You don't want to have a broken axle in the pothole in the parking lot. So, and if the lights go out in the parking lot, we need to be able to repair or replace them. And long-term bond facility asset management priorities, same thing, except that you will also add program improvements. This is for educational programs, for adding capacity, like at elementary number 7. We're looking at our elementary schools. 3 of them have cafeterias, 3 of them do not. The gym space and the ones that do not have cafeterias drives the entire schedule all day long because of the limited time to switch from PE to lunch and back to PE. and then major renovations too. So, like coming up soon in the middle of the 2020s, like 2024 for Bush Middle School and 2026, I believe, for Tumwater Middle School, they will be eligible for SCAP funding to do a major renovation, which at that time might include things like, all the interiors, changing out any old HVAC systems that can't be refurbished, and that kind of thing.
So in the next couple of years, thinking about our next steps, we have a couple of options available to us. One option would be to do nothing right now. If we did nothing right now, this capital levy would end at the end of 2022. The taxpayers would see a drop in their tax rate. However, we'd have no capital facilities funds to take care of the projects that Mel's been talking about in terms of future projects and everything you'll see here soon. The challenge of that is you end up deferring those projects. And then in a couple of years, when you need to run a bond, all those projects are sitting there unfinished. And you now have to run a larger bond in order to get those projects done. So for the taxpayer, what they experience is a short-term drop and then a larger lift later on. And the other option would be for us to ask for a replacement or renewal of the current capital facilities or the capital levy. That would be maintaining a level tax rate, and it would give us funds to continue to do the projects, the type of projects we've done the last 2 years, and what you'll see out of the current capital facilities plan that allows us to keep taking care of those so that when we do come to a bond, our other buildings, our investment, our current buildings is well taken care of, the bond is smaller, and we can seek to try and maintain a level tax rate while taking care of the next facility we need. So that short-term 2 to 4 year capital levy with a simple majority can help bridge that gap and maintain level taxes for people along the way. It also helps us ensure that that Clean Buildings Act compliance is taken care of, and we're taking care of all the critical infrastructure needs along the way. And it maintains that level tax rate as a renewal or replacement of the current. That is right now, that's a similar strategy to what we see happening in Olympia, who are finishing, Mel, is this their third of those?
Yes, they passed a 4-year capital levy, Olympia, in 2014 and another one in 2018, and they're considering one for 2022.
So this strategy would be similar to what we're seeing there as a way of maintaining level tax rate and taking care of projects across the district. So if we go forward, we also have that ongoing technology need, and the state doesn't really have an adequate structure right now for taking care of those technology needs across districts. And so the capital levy has continued to help us make sure that we're maintaining quality technology for our students across the district. It's what allowed us to put in place so much of what made the transition to remote learning go smoothly. And so there's what you see here is a list that Dan Reich has put together of the upcoming technology needs for the next 4 years. Chromebook refreshes continue to be something. They have a limited life cycle. So, and the kids do their best to take care of them, but sometimes they only last so many years in that way. Network switches, they just have, technology has a life cycle. And when that comes to the end of it, if we don't update those things, they start to fail, or they start to become too slow to meet the current needs of the traffic on our systems. So I won't go through all of those, but as you look down it, you can see there's a variety of projects that we'll need to continue to take care of to make sure the technology in our classrooms and the technology our students use is in good shape and meets our needs instructionally.
So this is something that we worked with on the Facilities Advisory Committee, and this I refer you to the handout I gave you just at the beginning of the meeting. And these were all the action items, corrective action items that Suzanne identified, plus items that I had added in that I have been gathering in my travels around the district. People like to tell me what's on their mind, and I always try to remember, and it's like, it's not really my duty, I feel, to say no to people. I like to use a committee to consider this. Is this something that we should be looking at? So, and when you look at these, an item that has 0 is like an immediate corrective action. And some of these are like, I think the very first one, investigate transformers at Black Hills High School. They're near the end of their life. They don't we don't know if they're at the end of their life, but this is something that, it's in italics also, so we'll have maintenance go and check them. There's a way to check to see how much life they have left in them. There's other things like adding arc flash labeling to electrical panels. That's just a little sticker that has to go on the electrical panels to warn people working on them to beware of an arc flash. And so 0 through 5. And we asked the committee to prioritize them by action type. And I think I got some out of order here, but so this is, if you take the 0 through 5s, you can see year 0, $7.7 million worth of items were identified here. 1.9 million, 2022, 4.4 in the next year. And finally, you can see 2024, 15.6 million. So that's $29.6 million in the first 4 years there. And we need to start chipping away at that, or things do not get less expensive the longer we wait. And we get in danger of not keeping people warm, safe and dry, or healthy, safe and secure. And this is how the committee prioritized our needs. We asked them to rate what they thought their 3 highest needs were, along with to rate what their 3 lowest priorities were. So that was an interesting exercise. So you can see health, safety, and security as expected is on top, and the site aesthetics and interiors on the bottom. So I also was telling Sean earlier that you see plumbing near the bottom, and that's to be expected until the pipe clogs, and then it goes to the top of the list. But that's the kind of things you need to be ready for with any kind of contingency funds.
I'd also say there's some unknowns, if we go back to that last one that were just referenced on the side here, or maybe in our notes.
Oh, yes.
That doesn't include the 4 million, that 29.6, about $4 million in what IT is identified in those IT projects that need to be taken care of over time. And the other unknowns Mel and I were discussing, for example, what we're hearing from our nurses now is that one of the things we need to start thinking about is potentially some renovations to our health rooms, because what has changed, as you know, the last 2 years is we now not only have a health room where kids come to get their medications and take care of their regular needs, but we also have a separate illness room for students who need to be quarantined because of symptoms of COVID. That has meant in many of our buildings, we've used a classroom or another space for that. Those spaces weren't designed for that, and for now that's okay, but at some point soon as we grow, we're going to need those classrooms. And it takes additional staffing to have this illness room that is far removed from the health room. So in a couple of our buildings where we already had kind of what Mel's referred to as a sick bay, we were able to cover that with 1 staff member. When it's in totally separate places, it's requiring another staff member in there. So over time, if that need doesn't go away, and we're hearing that that may not be a temporary need at this point, that may be something that is an expectation of us in the future, shifting, making sure our spaces can accommodate that so that it doesn't take extra staffing will be another project.
And I just noticed too, that $4 million is 4 million over 2 years. Over 4 years, it would be $8 million. I talked to Dan, and the last levy, we had $1.5 million per year for technology. And Dan has asked that we consider doing 2 million a year, just because we have some of these systems that are, especially video camera systems, that are aging out that will need to be replaced.
So I have a question about that. So why is that in a footnote and called an other unknown, even though there's a dollar amount associated to it? Why isn't that included as part of the entire package of?
This is what we got from the actual facility assessment, and the Cezanne team did not consider technology. So it was always something we have to remember to add to what they have discovered. They didn't estimate our technology needs over the next 2 to 4 to 5 years.
But that's something that we tack on and
Yes.
we roll that into the priority way of looking at the entire package.
This is the only way we have right now to fund additional technology is through levies. So.
So Going forward one more. So what we wanted to talk to you about and get your feedback on here is about financing. And with this summer, we had DA Davidson come and they showed you a slide that looked a little bit like this, but we've had them update it with a couple of scenarios for your consideration to think about and for you to give us feedback. Because our intent would be in November to be able to come with a proposed resolution that the board would be ready to support. If the board's ready to support a resolution on that. So here's a couple of key considerations for discussion. One is a 2-year versus a 4-year capital levy. What we did this last time was a 2-year capital levy, and we anticipated we'd be coming back now to request a bond. Turns out that's going to take a little longer than expected. So we could say, let's run another 2-year and come back in 2 years and say, we're either ready to run a bond or do something else. Or we could ask the community for a 4-year capital levy. What that does is maintains that constant tax rate, maintains funding for us to continue those projects until we determine it's time to run a bond. If we ran a 4-year capital levy and in 3 years we determine, wow, we need to run this bond now because the school need has come, we can always decide not to collect on the last year that capital levy to help maintain the level tax rate. So it doesn't mean we would be asking them for a lift then. It means we would just, it allows us the flexibility to determine when that next building is needed and run the bond at that stage. So 2 or 4 years would be one consideration. You see an option here for a capital levy that would generate 10.5 million or 21.5 million over 4 years. That would, DA Davidson estimates that would cost our taxpayers 67 cents per thousand on their tax rate. In 2020, when we ran the $10 million capital levy, we told the taxpayers that was estimated at 75 cents per thousand. And but you see the assumptions, they always use assumptions here. So they're assuming a 3% assessed valuation growth in the years of that levy. And if you look at the past few years, our assessed value growth has been 8%, 6%. And for 2022, the anticipation is 16%, which is extraordinary. So at this point, it's very possible our assessed value growth, if it continues at the rate it has, will be substantially more than 3%, but we always ask them to use conservative assumptions because we can't assume what's going to happen with the economy next year or the year after. And we want to make sure to, if possible, underpromise and overdeliver. Another scenario for consideration would be a levy that would generate 11.7 in 2 years or 24 million. We just bring these, and these aren't sacred. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but this just gives you an idea of the range. If we said, we're asking for a renewal at the same rate we asked you for in 2020, 75 cents per thousand, it would generate about $24 million over 4 years or 11.7. Now, when you see these, you might be thinking, wait a minute, go back to that list that Mel had, and there's about $33 million in projects on that list over 4 years. When we came in 2020 and talked to the board, we had more items on the list as well. And what we heard from the board is, let's prioritize. We're not going to get all of the projects done, but let's prioritize, take care of the highest need projects and work to maintain that level tax rate. So the scenarios we've shown you are seeking to, these are a little bit different in cost, but generally try to maintain a level tax rate while taking care of as many of those projects as possible. And we know we'd have to prioritize projects, and those things that don't get done would then be part of a bond project when we run it, but they'll be far less in one of these scenarios than there would be if we use the strategy of just waiting and pouring it all into a bond later. So what we'd really like to have you do is, thinking about that, I want to take some time to answer any of your questions for Mel or Jennifer or me, and to have a chance to hear from you your thoughts after seeing all this about what you see that we should take into consideration in bringing forward a proposal to you.
I have a question real quick. It was on that topic you just brought up. There was 33 million before, and now we're going 24 million. So is the intent we're going to make up the 8 million out of the general fund, or are we only going to get 24th of 33rds.
Yeah,
of
the
our
reality
work
is,
done. And we prioritize that and that's the list we want to get done, but we prioritize that list. And some of those things eventually will not get done or would have to carry over until the next bond or levy.
It comes to a prioritization process there, and sometimes you have happy discoveries, like when in the last levy, one of the things we had to do was we had to replace the wheelchair lift in the Performing Arts Center at Black Hills High School up to the control booth. Our district electrician looked at it and discovered there was a dip switch that was installed upside down, which is why it wasn't working. And it took, Otis Elevator was out for years and never discovered that. Our electrician discovered it within 45 minutes. So we had $50,000 budgeted. We didn't have to use it. So it went towards re-roofing the old library at Peter G. Schmidt, which was not in that levy budget, but it was an identified need. So we make those calls and along with our maintenance department.
So basically, just because it's identified and it's in this list and projected out of the priorities, it may not actually
Right.
get to, or we
Right,
may actually look at some other
and
things.
typically what we're gonna do is take the items that have a zero, year zero we need to do. And if it says life safety, that's the ones we want to make sure we get those covered first. And then we start going into health, for the, health, safety and security. We also want to make sure we're maintaining our assets. So we would look at re-roof projects that might be needed. And, building A at Tumwater High School is a candidate for this levy.
So that kind of leads into my next question. Can you explain the big bump then in 2024 and the work at the high school?
The big bump in 2024 is probably due to,
I think you just said the roofing on A and B and then.
right, and I'd have to look at the list in year 3 to see what that was. I was busy formatting and not looking at the numbers.
Oh, boilers. That was fun.
Yes, boilers,
Oh,
yeah, we've got,
HVAC.
we have an underground, we have a several thousand gallon underground fuel tank there that we're nervous about. That was being removed. This is kind of one that you see on the site is replacing 5, so this is where you get into more of the site aesthetics and interiors. So there's the tennis courts at Tumwater High School are basically have too many cracks to be successfully repaired. And if we go to if we're going to replace the courts, there's a need for a 6th court just to reduce the length of a tennis tournament. Painting the exterior. There's some windows in the end of the old gym, both sides, single pane windows of wood frames. So there's just it's an old building that needs attention, and it's the longer it goes, the more attention it's going to need. So things like replacing carpet, it's a big school. You replace carpet, it adds up quickly. So
Thank you, man.
Sean, were you saying our current rate is 75 cents per thousand?
for the capital levy, it's this year, it's 80. Next year, it will drop to 67. Remember, we can estimate a rate that at assessed value growth. Next year, you see that huge assessed value growth that we're seeing. That's going to drop that rate from 80 cents down to 67. So you saw one scenario we proposed was 67. That's where we're going to be next year. And so yes, that's so 75 is what we estimated to everyone at the beginning, and it's bounced a little above and now below. It will, in those 2 years though, it'll be pretty close to an average between the two of 75 cents per thousand.
So my concern is how this is going to be communicated and marketed to the community to convince them that this is a worthwhile investment. This presentation, I mean, makes complete sense to me. But what makes me a little bit nervous is the idea of floating around within the list. There was a list of 4 priorities that kind of began with the health, safety, security. Okay, so we go through those, but then I'm still confused about the technology piece. So if you're having to operate down a prioritization process, which happened with the facility advisory committee, that's a beautiful process. That makes complete and total sense. So how do we know when we can prioritize Chromebooks
Right.
and things like that. Because we're not in the best financial situation in this district right now, and
Mhm.
people are they kind of know about it. And unless this is explained and articulated over and over and over again, not just a few times, but with every single school, with every single community member, to really reinforce, this is what your money is going to be buying. And then we have to make sure that we're setting ourselves up to actually purchase the things that
Right.
we said. We said we were doing this for Chromebooks, for example, but then if we get a 4-year pass and we just never get to the Chromebooks, the community trust needs to be very carefully managed.
And as far as the technology goes too, we've always kept two separate budgets within the capital budget as far as this is all the facility building stuff.
Mhm.
And then there's a line of technology that $10 million is then there's a district technology committee, and it's their job to prioritize what they can do with that 10, I'm talking the last bond and the bond before that. There was, I think, 2003 bond, there was $6 million identified for technology that was then prioritized by technology committee. $10 million in the last bond, technology committee prioritized that. So we don't transfer between those two.
Mhm.
Technology is for technology and the facilities is for the facilities.
Mhm.
Does that help?
It does, but I'd like to know what the communication, and I keep coming to the word marketing. I don't know if that's the right term, but
Yeah.
you had gone out to like all the PTOs before with
Yes.
the previous levy. So is that the plan again? Is there a community-wide, we're coming out of some of the COVID restrictions, so.
Yeah, so remembering that what I can do when we go through this is I can't advocate for a levy. I can't advocate for or against a ballot measure, of course, as a school district employee, but what I can do is provide information about it to help educate the public about it. And that is in 2020, went to every PTO, every community group that would listen and presented and shared information on that so that they were well informed. And we had a number of strategies we used to reach out to the community, because we're allowed to publish one informational brochure and send it out to everyone. But there's also a number of other strategies that we can use. And I work with Lori and work with some entities to help us with how do we reach everyone, because we need our community to understand what they're paying for with that levy. And last time that strategy was pretty effective. Our intent would be to follow a similar plan to what we followed in 2020. And to reach out to the full community so they understand what we'd be asking for in that levy, how it would be used. And what we also try to do, because it's not just when you're running a levy that it's important, it's also important, and you'll see in a lot of our open lines, Lori will share with the community information about how we're delivering on the promises that we made. When we said, we're going to put in new sprinkler system at Black Lake, that system's about done. Sharing with them so that they understand that what we said we were going to deliver on, we're delivering on. And that's a critical part, I think, of helping the community have trust that when we ask for those funds, it's going to accomplish what we told them it would accomplish.
I just have one question. It's simple. I heard that the bond will take longer than expected. Why is that? No.
This is a very bad time to go out for a bond, because the 60% yes vote is a heavy lift to get to. The levy is a 50% yes, which is still a lot of work, but 10% easier by 10%. The bond is going to be a lot more projects, and we want to make sure, the major project will be the new elementary school, and we want to make sure we qualify for the maximum amount of SCAP funding that we can. And right now, we've had enrollment going like this. Looks like it's going like this. If we can get another year of like this, then right now, OSPI will estimate our enrollment doing this. It's just their formula. If we get a couple of years like this, they will estimate this, and that's the difference we want. Does that make sense? They do just a cohort, but they call it cohort survival. And that's what we want to show, that we're a growing district, and then therefore need more square footage, for example, a new elementary school. It unfortunately means that until we get to the point where we qualify for a maximum amount, we will likely have several more portables spring up at some of our schools. Because that's a student in a portable is an unhoused student, and that's what qualifies for more square footage.
Thank you.
I have a question about the, and DA Davidson may be able to answer it better, but the number, I remember hearing that whatever we run, the voter turnout has to be a certain percentage based on the year before, and we're safe from that. Is that going to be, are we going to be based on this coming up election here in a few weeks or?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's why you're typically not going to run a school election
After the presidential.
after a presidential election.
So we are, okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
But actually, I also hear that the validation has not been an issue in the past several years. Every district is validated, so.
So then it would behoove us to do our levy now, coming off the heels of an odd year,
Instead of a midterm.
and then our bond, not 24, but 25.
Yes,
24 will
or
be presidential,
actually, yeah.
or we have to do it in the February
We-
of
we-
24.
We would look
Yeah.
at 23 or 20 or February 24, but not 25.
Right, because that's
think
right
that
off the
we-
heels of the
yes.
presidential.
Yeah, so 23, 24, or 26, is that right?
Yeah.
And we can also check in with DA Davidson because they look at districts across the state and they'll give us a pretty good idea if we should have any concerns about validation or not. They can give us a pretty reliable prediction on that generally.
It's what their job is.
Yeah.
So school finance, school capital financing, so they track every nuance of it. So.
But we're safe this year.
So do people have a thought on 2 versus 4? Let's start with that question. 2 versus 4. We're just giving guidance to staff about what we'd like for 2.
I like 4 only because I don't like doing this every 2 years. But I think also that helps us align maybe better with our bond too. Future, and that's just saying here today right now. I don't know if that'll pan out that way, but that's just my thought. And the 4-year, I think our last 2 years been pretty solid, and I think a better way to help market this thing is to show what we've done the last 2 years. And I know Lori does a pretty good job of that, but maybe a summary. So here's what you did, and here's what we did, and I think that will help. So I would like the 4-year kind of. I think we've earned their trust to a degree for sure. So that's my preference, but I'm open to ideas.
And if we don't, or we would be going out for a capital levy at the same time as our AP&L, if we did a 2-year,
Mhm.
might be more difficult.
So.
I know you asked us about the rate too. I'm sorry.
Not yet. No, I'm
Okay,
just,
that's
not
fine.
everyone has
Sure.
weighed in on 2 versus 4.
Gotcha.
So, Sean, given your explanation about how district employees can't advocate, does that mean that as staff, you can't give a recommendation about any of this?
No, we can make recommendations on what you would put on the ballot. I just can't go out and tell people, please
Okay.
vote for this bond or don't please vote, vote for or against any measure. But as far as giving you a recommendation, we've talked about it and our first thinking aligns with what we've heard here is that a 4-year allows us the flexibility if we needed to run a bond in 3 years or 4 years, not to continue to come back to people every couple and say, hey, let's renew this, because I think that can get confusing for people. And the intent would be for this to be a bridge until we hit that point that the levy comes or the bond is needed. Another factor in that bond is we also want to get to a point that we really need that additional elementary, because every time you add another school, you add operating costs to the district. You can move some people into that new school, but you need another principal, you need another counselor, you need some staff that you can't replicate. So we'll want to be at the point that we can say, all right, we can handle the additional operating costs of another school when we open one.
Mel and Jennifer, is that your thoughts as well as a staff recommendation?
I like the idea of a 4-year. It also aligns with what Olympia is doing as far as, every 4 years. And I think that if we got on the same schedule, people, region wide would start to expect it.
Well, I'm in favor of the 4-year. Simply because I do not want to see this again. And I trust that Mel and Jennifer have made a good recommendation and speaking from their breadth of experience.
All right, so you have direction on 4. Now, do we have preference on the rate?
Can I ask a question? So if we set the rate and then like, as we said, property values goes up and the rate drops automatically?
I think it's best to set an
You don't
amount.
set a rate, you actually choose the amount.
The amount, and
And
then
then
the
the
rate
rate-
falls into line with
Right.
the amount.
Right.
versus-
Yes.
But this is just what you're.
This just
throwing
shows you
out
the
there as a
range. If
guideline.
you did- I mean, you could always go 25 million and the rate would be above
What it'd be
75.
right in between the two.
Right.
that you- Yeah, I'm,
So it's the amount of funding you want to generate, and then we would tell the community what rate we anticipate that would be.
Yeah.
and our current is 0.8, or it was, our last bond was estimated off 0.8. It's
Yeah,
actually
The
the
last levy has
Based
been
on-
0.8 for 2021.
the reality ended up being less because property
Right.
values went up. I don't see why it wouldn't, I mean, 0.75 or 0.8 seems reasonable to me. That's
Yeah.
keeping it in lines of flat. Now I get property values are increasing, so that's, actually more dollars, but,
You go to the next,
That would be that one right there.
so yeah, like 25 million, I think I would. We have the list, it's very well identified, at least at this point in time, and we're still 5 million short, so, or at least, actually a little more than that with the technology and the unknowns, so that would be my inputs, 0.75, 0.8, 25 million, whatever.
Anyone else have preference?
Well, I literally had like a conversation in my own head just now.
Ooh, share.
Yeah, it was like full on. My mind was thinking, as a citizen, I wouldn't like the up, down, up. But then I thought to myself, would I really even notice the difference?
Mm-mm.
I don't pay that close attention to my taxes. And so I'm not even going to notice it. Some people might, but the majority of folks aren't. And just with inflation, I would want more money coming in.
Mhm.
Because we'll need that additional money 3 years from now.
Yeah.
I'd like to be able to truthfully say to people that their tax rate, tax amount, whatever it is that is actually happening is not going to change significantly.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
whatever it takes to make the math happen in that way, because there's still a lot of people suffering from just the economic shock of last year and just might not quite be in that space yet. So I keep coming back to that, whatever it takes to convince people that this is a good idea, and people's money is a pretty big factor in that.
So with that, you see this year, that rate is at 80 cents per thousand, next year at 67. This amount of 24 million is estimated to be about 75 cents per thousand. Now, if our assessed value is increases more than 3%, it will be lower than that. So it's gonna fall generally in a pretty close range, right in the middle of the 2 years of this one at that rate,
Mhm.
potentially lower. It
Right.
could be toward the lower end of it. Depending on what happens with the economy. That's always the part we can't promise a rate.
Right.
So what is it in 2020? Why are there 2 dashes?
We didn't have the capital levy in 2020.
so it passed in 2020. It was, the first year was collected as calendar year 2021.
What was there's got to be a tax rate prior to, what tax rate are we on right now?
So go back to, you have some slides. Or you have these slides
We need to come
at
back
the
to,
beginning.
you would see.
So
the
we've been
total
hovering
tax
around
rate right
$5.
there.
Oh,
Yeah.
So in either of these, our intent would be to continue to hover right at about $5.
Yeah.
It would be, 67 and 75 would be an 8-cent difference, depending on assessed value growth. So it would be, our intent with both of those is to try to maintain right about this rate.
okay.
And we have limited control over that. I mean, year to year, Jennifer can work with them on the debt service fund and how much much we collect in that. That's one of the levers we have to try to help keep the rate level. But, you know, most of it is determined by assessed value growth in the district.
Yeah, my thought would be go for the 24-25 million, because I believe if we're, you know, that the assessed value is going to increase more than 3%. So I think the rate is going to be lower than what we're projecting right here. I understand why we project 3%, is so it will be lower, likely when it actually comes to that time.
All right, I think,
Do you have
I wanna make sure if
guidance
anyone else
that you
has-
need from us?
I think that gives us what we need to work on a resolution. We'll work with our bond counsel to put something together to bring to the November meeting. And the reason that's important is because the deadline to put it on the February 8th ballot is December 10th. Our December board meeting is December 9th. We'd rather not cut it that close and trying to get it to the auditor's office. So our intent would be to bring you a bond resolution in November. If that's approved, then we have plenty of time to do what we need to do to get that on the ballot.
And to make sure there's no confusion, I'll also be bringing a resolution for our annual certification of all of our levies for the year, which we do every year. So that will be just our annual certification for our current.
The current stuff, yep.
for our current levy, yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Great job.
Thank you. That was fun.
All right, now we're going to go to executive session. Yes, of course. How about
break.
10 minutes, some 15. Yeah, good luck. Good luck to